is August 2004, and we're interviewing our dear friend and colleague Dr. Elise Boulding about the origins of the fields of peace and conflict studies, peace and conflict research, this is part of our Parents of the Field project, Elise, which I was just explaining to you, that we're trying to get on record the recollections, the memories of the origins of the field, and some ideas about the future of the field from the people who started it. And we were just going through a list of people that we've talked to. So welcome to the project, and thank you for giving us your time. We're delighted to be here, delighted to see you looking so spry. And I'm going to ask you mainly, initially anyway, some questions about the starts of the peace research movement and the people that you recall and met in the 50s and the 60s. And I'm going to start by asking when you became interested and active in the peace research movement. Because you were, I mean, I think I met you, first of all, you and Kenneth, of course, back in the 1960s, when you were just starting the International Peace Research Association, and some of my mentors in London were starting the Conflict Research Society. How did you get involved in the peace research movement, and who was there with you?
Yes, indeed. Well, this goes back to the our babies were born. We have 5 children, 47, 49, 51, 53, 55. And then I was very much a homemaker in those days, but also had, we were a group of young Quaker families in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we mothers all wanted to be active in peace work, you know, as Quakers, that was part of what we did. And so we took each other's kids in so that we could go to special events and so on. And Kenneth had just started the Center for Conflict Resolution at the University of Michigan. And he would have a faculty seminar, so that, you know, to kind of get to talk out what the field was all about and so on. And I, you know, having ever since we married, you know, I've been learning as Kenneth, he was 10 years older than I, and he had already developed a lot of his thinking, you see, by then. So I just loved that he was my teacher. And I had taken, while waiting to get pregnant, it took several years before our baby started coming. I took a master's in sociology at Iowa State, so that I could learn to think sociologically, because my world had all been music and languages. I played the cello, and so I, you know, getting myself into a whole new world that was very, very exciting. And so this seminar, I wanted to attend that seminar and, you know, hear people talk and develop their ideas about the field of conflict resolution. Dave Singer was very much part of that.
David was there, wasn't he?
And Bob Hefner. And so I would, my kids would go to one of the other families in our group on the afternoon that there was a seminar, and I would carry a coffee pot down to the center. They just had a couple of rooms, just a tiny little place, and they serve coffee and sit and listen and take notes. I took notes on every speaker. And do you know that I learned a couple of years ago that those notes, I carefully wrote them up, and for the office, they are now in the archives at the University of Michigan, those notes. Yeah. I've never actually seen them, but somebody told me they're there. So that was, a tremendous education for me, as you can imagine. And then word got out, you know, as word does, that there was a center at Ann Arbor, and people started writing from different, from Norway and from England and India. People started writing saying, we hear you've got a center. This is what we're doing. What are you doing? Yeah. Well, there was no staff there. You see, there was Kenneth and the time that Dave could put in and one or two others, but there was no staff, and there was one part-time, just came in to do the urgent correspondence that absolutely had to be done. So what was happening to those letters? They were just winding up in the wastebasket because there was nobody to answer them. Nobody had time. And I finally, because I was there every week, I finally became aware of this. Thought, this is terrible. These letters need to be answered. And so I started collecting the letters and set up a system and suggested that we send out a newsletter just telling, what's going on and what we were hearing from other people. And they said, that's not, we need to be very careful to be academically respectable. And we can't just put out any old newsletter like that. Well, at the same time, I was very active in the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and we had set up a committee to support peace research. So I went to the League International Congress and said, can our committee, on behalf of the League, support and send out a newsletter about this new field that we're supposed to be promoting? Great, we'd love to do that. Yeah. So the letter came out. It came out from the University of Michigan Conflict Resolution Center, but it's the first issues, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Committee on Peace Research. So that was the start of what later became the International Peace Research Association. And so the letters came in, and my newsletter came out. I actually have the volume, that photocopied volume, sitting right here in my apartment. I can show you later when we move around.
Well, I mean, if you do remember, maybe we could take a copy of it for the archive down at Point of View one of these days. We are trying to get that kind of
okay.
Great. So was there any connection between that and Kenneth was working on the Journal of Conflict Resolution?
Well, and then that was then he got since the issue of the substance of the field and these seminars and so on, and then gradually holding meetings on various college campuses. So it became clear that a professional journal was needed. And of course that was outside my ken at that point. So the newsletter, you see, was a mimeograph document. The journal was published as a regular journal. But that's right. I think the first, I really don't remember too well, but the first year or two, I think he did a lot of the work on that, and then Dave Singer, I think, helped a lot. Yeah.
Yes. But it sounds like you'd established a network of contact.
That's
the International Peace
that's right.
So
and you see that there's several really exciting things were happening at the same time. The General Systems Society was developing then, and there were new ways of thinking about the systems and a new reaching out beyond one's own disciplinary borders, and thinking about picking up on what happened in the 1890s, the Hague Conference on peace, and here here we were getting ready for. I mean, had been in another war and an arms race, and so how can we bring together the different aspects of this to bring an end to the use of war as a means of solving disputes? So the professional journal was one very important thing, and then the futures movement, in its way, got into that, and Fred Polak came to this country, and there was that wonderful year at the Institute of Behavioral Science in Palo Alto, California, and Fred had just written the book The Image of the Future in Dutch. Die Toekomst is verleden tijd.
And then it got translated.
And I translated it. I translated. I was so fascinated. You know, Norwegian and Dutch are not exactly cognate languages, but I thought I could learn. Dutch. And Fred was actually staying in the guest house at the back of our house. That's where he lived that year.
Oh, I see.
So I got. He had the book under his arm and had just won the Council of Europe award. I said, "Oh, let me see it." You know. So once I read, well, I read a pony. I can't remember the moment. I've forgotten what the book was, but it was Dutch on one side and English on the other, by the Franz Alexander's Age of Unreason. That's what
okay. Yeah.
and so by the time I finished it, I could read Dutch, and so I said, I'd like to translate this. He said, I'd love to have you translate it. Well, so there were people in Europe, you know, start really thinking about the future. And Johan Galtung was a part of...
Yes, and there was a young Turk at that time, if I remember right.
Very much so, very much so. Johan and Ingrid Ede, who was his wife at that time, and I mean, there are so many people, and I, what I was what I'm trying to say is that the sense of intellectual and social movements, that things need to happen, things need to change, the future can be different, you know, and Fred Polak's thesis that societies that really imagine the future, who think ahead and are hopeful and feel that they can change things, they in fact do achieve the kinds of things they can imagine. And so the image of the future became really important for the development of future studies. And so I began during the, probably the 60s, meetings in Europe when there were, you know, sessions on disarmament and how can we go about disarmament. One day I was sitting in the audience when there were a whole host of very serious senior scholars, including my husband, on the stage, and they were talking about the things we had to do to get disarmament. And I said, and they were just, you know, they were just talking about this, saying the same things I felt over and over again. And so I stood up and I said, suppose we got disarmament, how would the world work? How would we be handling conflict? Not a single person in that panel, including my husband, felt they had any answer to that, because they hadn't thought in those terms.
Just get rid of the weapons and everything will
so that's how I started, and I decided, you know, go 30 years into the future. I started holding workshops. Go 30 years into the future, there are no more weapons. How's the world functioning? And then they have to, you know, and I really had a lot of fun over the years doing that.
Yeah, I remember you did an exercise like that.
I did that at Church Basin, yes,
Imagine that you are walking through a hedge.
Yeah, that's right. I take them through a hedge, right.
Yes.
Well, that's, and you know, and I would do, I'd do all kinds of versions of it. 2.5 days, you know, Friday night through Sunday afternoon was the longie. And the longer time they had, of course, the more creative stuff they could come up with. But I would do a shorty. And the last one I did, which is the last one I'll ever do, was 2 weeks ago at the Boston Social Forum, just before the Democratic National Convention. And I had a group, this is 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and it was a short, you know, hour and a half. About 18 people showed up, and they really got into it. They really got into it. It was marvelous.
What were they doing? Were they imagining a world after the election?
Well, I simply said 30 years. No, I did the standard. No, I wasn't linking it to the election. Just 30 years, because people know about this workshop because I have done it various places around here. They like to have chance for it. So 30 years into the future, and then spend some time on that. And I always have them do a pantomime, to show how that world is functioning. Yeah. These are the most creative pantomimes I've ever seen in all the years I've done it. Oh, it was marvelous. Yeah. And then, of course, okay, so how did we get to this? What happened last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? So we did a quick little history, and then the most important part. So what do we do now to get that process started? And everyone took, made some kind of a personal commitment. And of course that brought them right into the convention and the politics of it and so on. But no, it was very rewarding. And now there's a young woman up in Montpelier, Vermont, who asked if I would show her how to do them, and she now has, I have a workbook and so on. And so I spent time with her, and now she's being asked to do it all over Vermont, and so it'll go on, because I can't do it anymore.
You say that's the last one that you'll do.
Yeah.
I've used the technique myself occasionally in problem-solving workshops. Imagine that. What sort of a future would you imagine if the conflict is resolved, and then you work back, and then how do you start doing that sort of thing? It's a very, very useful exercise.
All this came out of Fred Pollock's book, looking through history, societies that really could imagine a future, and felt that they were empowered.
It was actually, I got a little bit of the sense of that time, because I came in at the very end of it in the middle of the 1960s, 63, 64, 65, and it was a very exciting time to be around, because people were thinking ideas from different disciplines. John Burke used to put forward this, we need to be a-disciplinary, he used to say. There was that, and then there was the whole idea of doing something research could contribute. It was really very, very exciting.
It was a very exciting time. It really was.
So, but then IPRA started in '64.
Yes, let's see. There was a period there. We met. What was the Dutchman who had been on the?
Not Hilke Tromp. No.
I'm sorry. Anyway, we held meetings in London, and we formed. What was the society that we formed?
Conflict Research Society.
No, before IPRA. It was. It had a funny kind of a name. Oh, this is so frustrating. Anyhow, we formed a group and started in London, and then very quickly it evolved. And then, but that was a very small group, and we didn't have any funds or anything. But I appealed to UNESCO, and then when they started to help, and they sponsored a meeting at Geneva, and that, I think, was the time when we chose the official name of the International Peace Research Association. So the UNESCO was very important there in the beginning in its support, and it helped. It financially supported the newsletter.
And I mean, not only the newsletter, because I remember as a graduate student actually reading the papers from the annual conference that had come out. There were about 3 of them, I think, when I started. Then you moved into having an annual conference.
Yes,
I found those books probably some of the best stuff that I could read. There wasn't much else in that.
That's right.
So, So, and UNESCO must have helped to fund those.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And Sana Oseran, who was a Lebanese living in Paris at the time, she became our person who carried on the UNESCO, our representative to UNESCO, and did a lot of. We were never able to pay her, poor thing, but she somehow managed.
Well, I mean, that seems to be the story of the field.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, work for,
Yeah.
For
Yes.
nothing or not
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
much. It was funny listening to you talking about the founding of the centre at Michigan, because it sounds almost exactly like the beginning of ICAR at George Mason University.
Yeah.
Half a secretary,
Yeah.
half a director, half a deputy director, you know, and being moved from one office to the other every year. It's so typical of the way things get started. We didn't have a Joan Kroc in those days to give people $50 million.
Exactly.
Where the Joan Krocs when you need them. So, all right, and you were the secretary of IPRA for many years, I think.
Pardon?
You were secretary of IPRA for very many years.
No, the first secretary was Norwegian. Oh, this. I'm so sorry. Really,
no,
this
is
yeah.
All right,
but so the office was at the Peace Research Institute Oslo. It wasn't Johan, mind you. No,
it wasn't.
It wasn't Johan Galtung.
I
No.
wondered about
No. He was involved with it. Yeah. But the actual Secretary General. Well, when I pull out that volume, you know, we can see what that sequence was and what the names were. And then we met in India. We didn't meet every year. I think we met every third year or something like that. And that was a very exciting meeting in India. And then I became Secretary General. It had already been going for a little while by then. Yes, it really had. And then the World Futures Society was forming about the same time. So I was going to Europe for both the peace research and the futures. Eleonora Mazzini was. We worked together very closely. And
you were working on a PhD at this time, weren't you?
Yes, by then I was working on the PhD. That's right, and we were at Boulder, Colorado by then. Yeah. Because the kids were all the kids were all in. I went back for the PhD when our youngest was in 6th grade, I think. And then, you know, I felt they were far enough along and I wasn't needed at home. It was we had been at Japan the year before. Let's see, that would have been 63, 64. We were in Japan. And the Peace Research, Japanese Peace Research Society really took off that year. We had a lot of contacts, a lot of good people, and that was a very exciting year. And that was the year I realized my kids were all in school. They didn't need me at home.
Did you take the whole family to Japan?
Oh yes, we were all there. We were at the International Christian University in Mitaka. And that was a very much of a turning point year. And I was editing the newsletter from Japan then, you see, the IPRA newsletter. And so that Japanese group became very strong, and then, as you know, the Secretary General that went there. But when I gave up being Secretary General, it had gone to Latin America.
Yes.
It had been there, the Secretariat.
Clovis.
Pardon?
Clovis, I think.
Clovis Brigagao.
Yes.
And then I had it, and then the person who took it from me is no longer living. He died shortly after he took it over, actually, at Antioch. He was at Antioch. Paul
Smoker.
Paul Smoker. Yeah.
Yes,
that was very sad. Yeah, that was very sad.
I knew Paul from when he was up
Yeah.
in Lancashire, in
Yeah.
England.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Richardson Institute started up.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Then
That's
it
right.
moved to London.
Yeah.
And it moved back.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul,
So all of this circle of people, you know, they just moved around around the world, and India always had India and Japan always had very strong groups, and there was oh, come on, where was Brigham? What?
It's Brazilian, I think.
Brazil, yeah, Brazil. And I still hear from the father, a Catholic father, who really took the whole thing under his wing in Brazil. Yeah, I still hear from him sometimes. Well, there was a lot of things happening. Yeah.
So you'd finished your PhD and you were working for IPRA and on the futures, and then how did you get to Dartmouth? I've always been curious about.
How did I what?
How did you get to Dartmouth?
Oh.
What was the story behind
that? Yes. We started a Peace Studies program at the University of Colorado, and I was doing. I taught a sort of a core Peace Studies course there, and so on, and I'm doing a lot of different stuff, working very hard because there were so many things to do, and they had a very active student group, and I spent a lot of time with student activists and demonstrating with them, and so on. But Dartmouth, by then I had done a certain amount of publishing, and of course Kenneth was very well known. And Dartmouth had a sort of visiting scholar program, and Kenneth and I were invited to come together just for a year. And Kenneth at that point was retiring, so that made a very good point for him to do that. And he being 10 years older than I. So we had a delightful year there, and they were very interested in peace study stuff. Anything I could do, I would get immediate response. And so they asked me to stay on and chair the sociology department because they were short a person anyway, but I stay on and chair the sociology department. Well, my salary more than doubled. You can imagine. But much more important, I had the carte blanche for anything I wanted, any projects I wanted to start and so on. So I had a great time developing an interdisciplinary peace studies program there, and having faculty seminars, and working with the women's studies. Pardon?
That still survives, the program?
Oh yes, it's still there. It's still there.
Who's running it now?
Well, it's a very I'd have to look it up to tell you. They came here, they visited me here recently, so I mean I am in touch with them, but the name, my age, I just can't pull names out of my head like that. But and the person that worked very much with me, and he had been at UNESCO. He was in the political science, so I had very strong support in the political science department. Good. And one of my best students there, Andrea Strimling, works at the Federal Mediation Service, and she is here now doing her PhD while working for the Federal Mediation Service at Tufts. And so we get together, and she's doing very exciting work. You know, it's wonderful to have a student who really takes off.
Yes, isn't it? Yes, you actually feel that it's worthwhile.
Yeah, that's right. That's
my
right.
old friend John Groom from back in London always says, you know, that the great thing, your success is measured by your students, not by books or anything like that. So,
yeah, well, that's the truth. So I retired in 19. I was just there for what, seven years or so, because Kenneth didn't want to move up there. You know, he had trained all these graduate students at Boulder, and he wanted to be there where he had all that stuff. And the department, the economics department at Dartmouth was just a very small department. You know, it wouldn't have been a place for him at all. So we had a commuting marriage the years that I taught at Dartmouth. But he was doing a lot of, we were both doing a lot of international travel for, you know, the peace studies and futures and so on. So we sometimes I turn up at a hotel somewhere in some part of Europe and ask for a room, and they say, let's see, we have a Kenneth Boulding registered here.
Do you know them?
We find we were both in the same hotel, going to different conferences.
It does turn out to be a very small world on occasion. I was down in Bogota in Colombia last summer. I was having breakfast and suddenly somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked around, and it was my old friend from Spain, Juan Gutierrez, who was there for another conference.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Said, what on earth are you doing here? And then we hadn't seen each other for quite a while. So.
That reminds me, talking about countries where the peace research activities, Spain was had some very strong people, and then UNESCO had a very strong program. So I went to Spain a lot. I loved it, you know. Catalonia, one of my favorite places.
Well, you went south. I tend to go to the Basque country in the north.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, that's more exciting, but a little more dangerous.
Well, yes. We've had a project there for about 10 years.
Oh, did you?
And, it's just started to revive.
Yes,
again.
yeah.
So, it's interesting. But there are some good programs in Spain now.
Yeah.
And one of the things, well, I'll come back to that in a minute if I may. Yeah, all right. So then you'd started IPRA, you'd become interested in futures. One of the other things that you, I think, were interested in, I believe from the very beginning, is the role of children and the role of women.
Oh, yes,
and that didn't seem to get very much play in the 60s where I was. You must have had a hard struggle to get that.
Well, I had at the beginning of the women's movement, you know, setting up a women's section for the sociologists and the economists, you know, and all the professional associations. So I was very active in doing that for the sociologists, and of course IPRA had to obviously had to have a women's group, and I took there was a point at which I had just been doing too much traveling around the world, and I was kind of burnt out. And so I took a year of solitude in our hermitage in the Colorado Rockies. We have a little family cabin there, and then I had a little hermitage built. And with Kenneth's strong support, he understood my problem. That he was, this was well before I went to Dartmouth. So I had a year there, and didn't intend to really produce anything special, but that's the year I wrote The Underside of History, A View of Women Through Time. And so this was one of the first books about women, but of course so many books came out after that that it kind of got lost in the shuffle. But having shown how women from hunting and gathering days, you know, what their roles were and how important they were, and so on, and then right up to the present, that was a very rewarding thing to do, and also made me very aware that wherever I was, that was women who had to be supported and helped to stand up and speak, you know, and not just be the polite behind the scenes or arrangers and so on.
Yes, welcomers, coffee makers.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it certainly had some effect, because we're doing some work down in Colombia at the moment, and there's a very strong movement in Colombia, peace movement. And many of the leaders down there are women.
Yes, I gather that. Yeah,
quite brave women down there who are trying to bring an end to
I just got a letter from the peace brigades saying that they're being attacked and their accompaniment work. They were really in danger now, and so they're sending out messages wherever they can, you know, that they...
Yeah, I got the same message,
yeah.
and I checked with the people in peace brigades in Washington, and they said that they managed to get an enormous response to that.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad, yeah.
They could put pressure on the United States government, the US government put pressure on the Colombians.
Very good.
Uribe, the president who was making all of these accusations, hasn't exactly retracted them.
Yeah.
But the danger, of course, Elise, as you know, is that, you know, once you make that statement, it's out there, you know, and people will act on it. And so I'm quite worried about, you know, Peace Brigades International are down there. Christian Peacemakers has got a team down there.
Yeah.
The American Friends Service Committee's got a team down there. They're all accompanied.
They're all down there.
They're all
right,
vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I've got some good friends down there as well.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. There's something I'd like to mention, and I feel I've had a bit of a sort of a part to play in its happening. You know, the International Nonviolent Peace Force. Back in our year in Japan, that was 63, 64, a group came through who had walked from India and wanted to cross the border into China. And they couldn't make it, and it was, they called themselves, well, it was based on the Indian, what's the Indian nonviolence? Satyagraha. Yes, and the groups, what were the Gandhi started peace teams, local. What's the word? Oh, this is maddening.
I can't remember the word.
Yeah, but these
local peace groups.
Local peace groups who would receive training in nonviolence, and the idea was that every town all through India should have them, and then that they should go abroad. Oh, it's so maddening not to be able to come with that term. Did you got it?
Yes. No, I haven't got the name, but I know the concept.
Well, so they came, this group came through Tokyo, and we talked very seriously, and then the Peace Brigades formed out of that group. Then the Peace Brigades International formed, and then the Christian Peacemakers team, which was in the beginning was Quakers, Mennonites, and Brethren, and so on. And I was following all of these, and then I suddenly became aware that these were all doing the same kind of work, but they were all operating independently, and they didn't know about each other.
No, it sounds so typical of the field, though.
So what did I do? I started a newsletter, the Peace Team's newsletter. And I could find some here that, of course, I was still editing the Peace Team's newsletter when I moved up here to my daughter's house. I stayed the first couple of years I was here. I was living with my daughter in Wayland before I came here to North Hill. So I was still editing the Peace Team's newsletter, but then, you see, I was every type of, you know, the Peace Brigades and all the others, and then the group that was, and I reported on the early beginnings of the group that became the International Nonviolent Peace Teams. Sorry, I'm still trying to come up with the name of the Indian term. It's so maddening not to be able to
go back. It'll come back.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Then I turned over. It got to be. I really, once I was here, I didn't have the kind of facilities for doing newsletters that I had when I was back in Boulder. So I turned it over to someone else who carried it on for a while, but it dropped. But the others were developing. But then the International Nonviolent Peace Teams really represents, in a sense, it does the work of all these peace teams. And so, in a sense, I feel they are coming together into, although they still have these separate, with the separate names, nevertheless, the Nonviolent Peace Brigades is now the culmination of that peace team movement, I feel. And you know, they're in Sri Lanka, and they're officially there. And so I feel I'm following that work very closely, and I think it's very, very important. So I think this peace team, nonviolent peace team stuff, is another aspect. It's not peace research, but it's the larger field, you see, of the peace studies, definitely, and the nonviolence training and so on. So I feel, I really feel that my period of doing the newsletter helped to bring people together. And
well, they certainly seem to know about each other. I mean, I remember talking to some of the people down in the Peace Brigade's office in Washington about Colombia, which is where we're doing some work. And they said, oh, well, we do the work here in Urabá, but if you want to know about what's going on in Cauca or one of the other parts, then you talk to Christian Christian peace team. And American Friends Service Committee have got some people here. So even though, and they produce their own newsletters now. We get the TBR.
Yes, I do too.
And Christian
yes,
peace teams
what I really would like to see some another step forward, because they are the nonviolent peace teams now has offices in I think 20 or 30 countries, and I would like to see a more formal network there.
Yes. Can you remember who it was took over the newsletter? Because maybe if we were to talk to that person, we could help. I mean, you know, the Institute is quite good at producing newsletters.
Yes. Well, I'll look for it afterwards. I'll look for it, and see if I can tell you.
But going back to the other side of your work on women.
Yes.
Work on families and children.
Oh yes, families and children, right. Well, it became so, well, and let me come back also to NGOs. I think by awareness of international, well, I'm sorry, do you mind if I go back to NGOs and then we come back to women and children? The first year we were married, I was living in Princeton, and I really didn't have much sense of what to do. You know, I had just graduated from college, been a year out of college, and didn't really have a direction. But I was now a very active Quaker, and so I went around to all the local churches, because we were concerned about the U.S. not entering the war. This is 1941, and it gradually dawned on me that every church represented an international community of churches, and then the YWCA, the Scouts, and the YWCA and the YMCA, I became aware that there were these international networks that had a presence in local communities, but really were international, transnational networks. And I woke up to the NGO phenomenon. And that was, from then on, you know, any place I was always looking for the relevant the local presence, you know, of transnational networks, and then discovered the group at the UN when that was formed, you know, that made a network of NGOs at the UN and so on, which still is very, very active, still put out their newsletter and so on. So that sense of networking was very important then for all the things I did later. And then the newsletter concept, you see, is a way of tying different networks together. And then the opportunity to work with UNESCO, because UNESCO had was encouraging so many. In those days, UNESCO really was doing serious work, the culture of peace and all that, which these days they do so little. It's so sad, so sad, so sad. So then if I having said that and becoming aware of NGOs, I'll go back to women and children. That our own children, became very important to this group of mothers in Ann Arbor. That our kids learn all about nonviolence and so on, and so we took very, very seriously and setting up programs and started family camps and things like that, so that families could train together. Kenneth wrote a wonderful sonnet for a Quaker wedding some years ago, and celebrating the founding of One Small Plot of Heaven, which I use as the title for the book on children and family life. Pardon?
That's where the title comes from.
That's where the title comes from his sonnets. Yeah. And so I became so aware that what we did at home and how we conducted our affairs, we used to have Quaker meeting for business to discuss what the allowances should be, what jobs, what people were doing.
Right, yes, when they should be home.
So we have some minutes from those. Kenneth would take the minutes. I have a few of them. They're kind of fun. So anyway, it became so obvious that what children were learning in school, that's why the importance of having training in peace issues in kindergarten, elementary school, high school, not just the university peace studies. So I think from the very early days, I was very conscious that the environment that our children had, the social environment and the neighborhoods we lived in, and how it would have meetings with neighbors to make sure they all understood about conscientious objectors and so on, and Pendle Hill was a very good place for gatherings to the Quaker Center outside of Philadelphia. Very good place for that kind of gathering. But the children, the importance of respecting children seemed to me to be the other side of the importance of respecting women. Both were considered, second status, second class. Remember when I was teaching a family, taught a class in the sociology of the family at Dartmouth, and I had the students write down memories of their childhood, a time when they helped one of their parents through a difficult time.
Oh, that's nice.
And two different ones, one before they were 12 years old and one after.
Oh, yeah.
And I got some that went back to like 4 years old, really? Helping a mother who was grieving for her mother.
Oh.
And so it became so clear that children have a level of understanding of what's going on in their, but not just in their family, but their neighborhood, that adults don't. And so I became a sort of a crusader for respecting children. And Children's Rights in the Wheel of Life is the book that I wrote for the International Year of the Child, where I documented, you know, how much kids know, and so on. And if we're going to do peace work, I mean, we have to have them with us. And then the other, and for the women's, the fact that women are listeners. Men don't listen. Women do.
That's a sweeping generalization. I think I would disagree, but okay.
I would just said that almost as a cliche. I mean, you don't understand. But it's easy to slip into cliches for that. But but the pointing out to women that all the listening they did wasn't just making them subservient. It was giving them understanding, but they were then responsible for speaking up about what they understood from all their listening. And that's what they weren't doing. They weren't doing it. And so I feel that the respecting children and respecting women, although in some ways they were quite different, but in other ways were, you know, these were the precious resources for peacemaking in every community, and that's where you start with the local to global. You start in the family, and then the neighborhood, and then your town, and then the state you live in, and the national office and the international office, and so on. But that these are actually action pathways for children and for women, as well as for men.
Yes, I mean, Chad Alger, of course, whom you
yeah, oh, well, in fact, he was very important in my life in helping me to understand the richness of the NGO world.
Yes.
And I used his material in teaching, you know. I had students, my students were all over every town wherever I taught, because they're doing Chad kind of work, you know, finding the NGOs.
Yeah, Chad came and visited the Institute a couple of months ago. I hadn't seen
Oh, did he?
Oh,
yeah, he's still active.
Oh, yes.
I had such a nice letter from him recently.
That's right. He's emeritus now at Ohio State, I think, but he's still doing just as much work. As far as I can tell, he's just as busy.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, one of the interesting things about our Colombian work is that when we look at a lot of these peace communities, zones of peace, municipios de paz, one of the things that they often start out by doing is setting a number of rules about how they will behave within the community. And the rules include no abuse of women, right, developing of youth, making sure that their kids do not get taken away for child soldiers, which of course is what a lot of paramilitaries do. So a lot of those ideas about, you know, women and children as a resource, I think, have actually caught on in a practical way. It's very impressive. You know, because a lot of the culture down there tends to be, you know, very much machismo and centered on men. So anyway, okay, so that was where a lot of your interest in women and children and NGOs came from. I'm going to sort of switch now a little bit from, you know, your activities in the past and how things got started to some general questions about the field itself. A couple of things that have puzzled me, and I'd like your take on them. One of them is I got brought up in a field which was called conflict research when I became part of it, and then became conflict analysis and resolution. And there's always been this sort of division or difference of emphasis between peace research and conflict research. And I've never been able to see that there's that much difference between the two, but there is that sort of that difference of emphasis. And you know, I've heard people say, well, conflict research is really part of peace research. I've also heard people say, well, peace research is really part of conflict research. So, do you have a take on that?
Well, I think it's conflict and peace. I do know that people have different emphases, but it's certainly the field itself. In fact, what I like the term that our friend from your part of the world, conflict transformation. The Mennonite, what's his name?
John Paul Lederach.
John Paul Lederach. Yeah. Conflict transformation. I like that term very, very much. Because, well, I always start in any setting and talking about anything to do with peacemaking with the fact that no two human beings are alike. And so we have to, so we don't experience things the same. And so therefore, there will be differences and conflict, and understanding that basic human diversity, which occurs in interpersonal relations and in families and so on, and obviously occurs in societies, and being aware that there are 10,000 societies spread all across the 191 states. Means that this diversity requires that you can either that we have two basic responses, and one is two others. One is that we need human support. You know, we need other humans, and we need to belong. The other is that we need space to be ourselves in our differentness. So we have both needs, the need to belong and the need for space and respect for differences. And so that any life situation has those elements in it. And in some cases it never arises that as a problem, but increasingly in today's world, with more interaction across more of the boundaries than we used to, boundaries, social boundaries, that we just have to learn the skills of dealing with it. And so that the whole field of conflict and peace research is learning the skills of dealing with difference creatively.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's really just a matter of labels that we use and misuse. We're really talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And I wrote a piece on it for Ho 1 on conflict transformation.
Oh, yes.
How different is it from conflict resolution? You know, my memory of conflict resolution as it originally was pretty much the same as conflict transformation. Yanni's written about it as well. So. But I do like John Paul's work.
Yes, I do too. Well, I know that Kenneth felt that towards the end that he was sorry that they had made the term resolution so central, because not every conflict is resolved. You know, I mean, there's so many other dimensions, so to speak. And so I think he wished, he was sorry that they had gone for that term, but there it was. I mean, nothing you could do about it at this point.
No, it's a little late, isn't it? How did he hit upon that for the journal?
How
did he come to that? Was it his own idea? Did he discuss it with
I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I don't remember. I mean, I just took it in. You know, that was at that stage. I was just taking in whatever. He was my teacher.
Now that was a remarkable journal. It was very, very much the journal of the field when I came into it in the 60s. That and Johann's journal Out of Oslo. They were Now there are so many. It's incredibly difficult to keep up with it.
Well, for me, an interesting scenario was the relation between Johann and Kenneth. You know, 12 friendly quarrels.
Yes, I think probably Kenneth was the only person that Johann ever quarrelled with in a friendly fashion. Because if it had been written by Johann and John, it would have been 12 unfriendly quarrels. But yeah, I mean, Johann was a very, very important figure in the beginnings of the field.
He was.
but he's always been something of a maverick.
Yeah, that's right.
Yanni and I were talking about him coming over. But what was he like when the field was developing? Was he what part did he play? I mean, because
well, he was so sure of himself. Yeah. You know, everybody else was sort of struggling to cope with some new concepts, and he just went right in there and he says, I know it all, and start telling. Really, he was preaching from the beginning.
Remarkable guy.
That's really, but he had a remarkable mind. Oh, yeah. He had a remarkable mind. But he was active as a student, you see, so he was still a graduate student.
That's right. I think he went to jail, didn't he?
I think he did. I think he did. Right. Yeah, that's right. So he was the temperament, you know, was of a fighter.
Still is.
Yeah, and still is. Yeah. But at the same time, a remarkable mind. Just, you know, it wasn't. Kenneth and he both had very remarkable minds, but they were very different kinds of remarkable.
But they did share things as well.
They did share things.
That they could take different skills, different backgrounds, different material, and make something
put them together. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. That they did have that in common. Yeah.
And it's a remarkable gift. It really is. Now, and the other person that I meant to ask you about from those early days was Bert Rolling. Do you remember Bert? I think he was the
he was the Secretary General of that first organization, which had some funny name that wasn't IPRA.
He was very much involved in the early years of IPRA.
And he had been on the War Crimes Tribunal in Japan.
Really? I didn't.
I think that was right. Yeah. And so that's how he got interested in all these issues. Yeah. That there had to be a better way, and and so on. Yeah. And he was I admired him very much. I
think I met him once, but only once.
Yeah,
so I have no impression of him at all. The other, switching gears again a little bit. One of the things that I always admired IPRA for was the way in which you and the others in the organisation were able to bring in non-American and non-European participants. I mean, the thing about conflict research is that it always tends to have been something of an Atlantic thing. North America, Europe, Scandinavia. And we're only just beginning to tap into some of the riches that come out of the writings from Latin America, for example. IPRA seems to have managed to get people in from all over the world. Did you deliberately set out to do that? How did you do it?
Yes, well, I think, interestingly, Eleonora Mazzini and I were both doing that, she in the futures field, and bringing in, for example, we had Russians participating both in the futures group and in the and then Saul Mendlowitz and Dick Rich Falk. They formed a group that I was a part of. I was never officially a part of it, but I participated in a lot of their conferences. The it was they published books on remaking future possibilities. Yes. The World Order Models Project. World Order Models Project. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I remember one.
Yeah. And so that always included all the continents, you see, and having see, who is that extraordinary Muslim who he's been in this country now for many years, but a very, very important scholar, and he was part of the World Order Models Project, and he's still alive. Oh well, that's the way it is. I could look these things up and come up with an answer, but I can't do it this way. Anyway, this sense of the riches of Indian civilization, and also the riches of African traditions. Now, there was another man who was an African, and again, I'm not coming up with his name, but who had done a lot of writing, and that would have been from sort of the Mediterranean, North Africa. Senegal. He was from Senegal. Yeah. But the riches of these traditions, and then we didn't get many. Well, we had Russians. We never really got very far with China. No, that was one. But Japan, was right in there. Korea was right in there. Yeah.
Well, Taiwan, for example, is just one of a number of people from South Korea.
Yeah. But we had a very early IPRA meeting held in India, and that was very important because it emphasized that we weren't just the same old Euro.
North Atlantic axis.
Yes, right. And I have always felt very strongly about that, and resented that that kind of attitude. When my doctoral dissertation, I studied the human relations area files to make charts of how far a woman could walk from where she lived, what the boundaries of her travel were in her daily life in different countries of the world, using current, and then using current census data on employment and all that kind of stuff. And it made it very clear that women in the 2/3 world had much more freedom than women in the 1/3 world. That is, in terms of distance covered. Because in the 2/3 world, many women were market women and had to do a lot of traveling, or they had to go a long way for wood or whatever. I mean, some of that was bad, maybe, but on the other hand, they knew a lot more about their terrain than women did in Europe and North America.
Again, I can only remember this in my own case dimly, but you may be able to get back to some of that feelings that you had at the beginning of the field, that here was something exciting and it was going to produce. What were your hopes for the field of peace research when you first entered it, and to what extent do you think the field has fulfilled those hopes, and where do you think we need to do more work?
Well, I always felt frustrated by the conflict between the researchers and the activists. And I felt that peace research should include activism. And I spent a lot of time finding ways to talk about it, that this is not, you're not being academic, you're not being scholarly, and so on. And because I did so much being active, I was international chair of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and so I spent a lot of time in international women's groups. Was just generally, and the Quaker groups, and the American Friends Service Committee, and so on. So I spent a lot of time trying to frame action within an analysis of the state of society. research on the process of dealing with difference, and what those processes involved, and also saying that defining action as, for example, working in your family, it can be peace action, and writing an analysis of steps to the resolution of a conflict in a particularly troubling conflict situation was research, but it was also action. So I just kept trying to find ways to put them together, that action, because it was almost as if you're in the action mode, then you're not being responsible, you're not being, all that. Yeah. That was very, very important to me, and any chance I ever got, I tried to do that. But in the IPRA meetings, didn't have much luck with getting. We did have one division. I can't remember now which one. We had one on that essentially covered research on peace action. In fact, the Luke Reichler, who's going to be the new Secretary General, I'm delighted at that. I think he and I worked on that. So it's to my mind, you see, there's a kind of a false scholarship, a pseudo scholarship, which is so completely separated from the world, and you're just putting your mind to it, and that's the real mental stuff. Yeah. And action research is a no-no. You're not. If you're doing action, you can't be doing research. So it's. There's still people who feel that way, I think, but it's now it's more that there are so many. For example, the group that Andrea Strimling is very involved with. They're a network of scholars who all do mediation type activities, but they're all scholars, and they have a network and so on. And for them, there's no either or at all. The action is research, and the research is action, and so there's a whole network now of groups that see it that way. But I would be interested to participate in a discussion at an IPRA meeting of that and see what people would say, because I'm sure there are still people who feel that's not, there's something impure about action.
Yeah, it's, we come across this as well, though. At George Mason, we try to produce, on the one hand, practical theorists, and on the other hand, practitioners informed by theory. But it's difficult to get this accepted in academia. Practitioner is a bad word. That's the word I was trying to think of. Yeah, that's for many people that's a bad word. Or it's not a bad word. It's simply you're something less. Yes. Something less. Yeah, that's right. Ridiculous. Yeah, well, we haven't actually solved that particular one.
No.
Elise. What other sort of hopes did you have that you think we need to work on?
Well, I feel that we have a certain network now of peace studies programs, but that network isn't still growing. In other words, it's sort of static now, and so the new universities don't necessarily form peace studies centers, and I feel that there needs to be, for example, I get a newsletter from who is it Uganda? That area, you know, the Great Lakes area, there's just so many terrible things going on there, but there are also a lot of Quakers there. And so they do a lot of nonviolence training and so on, and their newsletters, you know, about that, I think are very, very important. But I don't see any connection with academia there, and there really should be. There really should be. So, and I know that's one thing that I like about what I do get from South Africa. You know, that you see the relevance of the research for the action. That's not the same kind of issue. Or at least that the way it comes through, it filters through to me, is not the same kind of issue.
I get the same impression. If you're looking for a place in Africa where the tradition of research and action is very strong, certainly South Africa. I mean, they have an awful lot to teach us, and we really ought to be more integrated with them rather than the other way around.
And I feel now that the work, there is, in fact, there has always been, I think, a peace studies group within IPRA that worked with younger childhood education, sort of. But it's always been a sort of an IPRA, something off to one side, and I would like to see it being taken as one of the major activities, because. And I feel now, you know, if I were younger, I would be starting a campaign to get the International Baccalaureate woven into all of our peace research networks. Are you familiar with the International Baccalaureate?
The IB,
its headquarters is in Geneva, founded by Bob Leach many, many years ago. And I have a daughter in Denver who is doing her baccalaureate, graduated. She's in her senior year of high school. She's doing the baccalaureate, and she has to work awfully hard because you have to do whatever the standard requirements are, plus the baccalaureate. But you know, so she's learning history the way history ought to be taught. And when you think how most American children are learning history, something that somehow culminates in the United States, the great civilization.
Well, the IB actually is gradually being accepted, I think, in this country. I know that Emily, my older daughter, almost took it at her school in Virginia.
Oh, really? Oh.
And I think she got put off by the fact that it meant that she would have to drop certain other things that she wanted to do. So she went through on the norm. But
I see.
A lot of her compatriots.
Really? Oh, yeah.
So
most people, when I mention it, have never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, it's a slow.
Of course, given where you're located, I can see that there would be that area would be more alert to those possibilities.
Yes, it's very much an international area around Washington, D.C., so I think you're probably right, that was why it was there. Okay. How, apart from that, how would you like to see the field develop from now on? I mean, you implied a few minutes ago that it's sort of stuck. Where would you like it to go now?
Well,
what would it need to have to go there?
Yes. Well, I would like to see a special section of IPRA working very closely with the International Nonviolent Peace Force and doing backup research that would help them, and then all the different peace teams. In other words, that this would be that because this is going to be so important in the level of bloodshed now going on. The Great Lakes region and other regions, and then in parts of Latin America, it's just awful. And Iraq, well, so that if we could just build in a working relationship between scholars who are doing research and the practitioners, and each each needs the other.
Yeah.
They need each other.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to see more emphasis on the K through 12 years as peace education. And again, as I say, we have a childhood. I can't think of the name of the section, but there is something. There is something. But it's so important because kids are sitting in front of TV sets. They don't know anything about the real world out there. They don't even know their own communities, and they don't know anything about nature. They don't understand the fact that we're going to run out of water and food, and we're destroying the planet. That's a whole other set of issues, the ecological issues. But I think that these are peace issues too, and so a better understanding of the interdependence of all living things on the planet ought to be a major part of peace research.
Well, we tried for a while at ICAR to have a special one-year appointment which we called a practitioner in residence.
I remember that,
That? And for a number of years we carried it off, and it was so valuable in a number of ways. One of which was, of course, that it gave the practitioner time to sort of come out of what he or she had been doing and reflect on it and put some stuff down. But the other great thing was, of course, it was very, very interesting for our students, because here was somebody who had actually been on the streets of Belfast or working with people on the West Bank. But again, it comes back to resources. One of my worries, and I don't know whether you think that this is a serious problem or not, is the way resources are drying up for peace and conflict research. I mean, it worries me very much.
Well, but that's because we haven't made the connections. If we had made the connections, then the relevance might be seen. But we haven't. We have tried to be so purely academic, and we've succeeded, unfortunately succeeded, and so just to open up that subject within IPRA itself, and in peace studies areas, that the action research is a part of. And the practitioner role is central. And it'd be very interesting to have a meeting of people from all these different professional organizations that, from the practitioners and so on, and the scholars, and talk this out. I think there really ought to be a major international ongoing seminar on that subject. I really do.
Well, maybe Luke is the person to get it going. I mean, he's interested in practice as well as in scholarship. So
who?
Luke Wright.
Oh, yeah, Luke. Yes, right. Yes. Yes, I'm very happy with his that choice of him. Well, I reading now being in. When they say volume 6 of the Gandhi series published by the Indian government, I'm getting more and more aware of how he mistrusted civilization.
In what sense?
That civilization led to doing so much evil. And there are two views of civilization, of course, but to realize how the exercise of power is so easily abused, and civilization is about getting power in one sense, you see, whether it's mental power or physical power, and then the abuse of power, and so Gandhi was putting a lot of his energy into moving the school system out of the British organized school system and to have empowering education for children, which he succeeded to do in only a few of the ashram schools.
Yes.
But when I sitting here now looking at the state of the world and seeing that every day reading the newspaper is so depressing. It's so depressing. And the greed and misuse of resources of every kind is everywhere. And so how do we take a fresh look at the human enterprise?
The trouble is it's a huge task, and what you seem to be saying, if I've understood you correctly, is that peace research really needs to go in the direction of thinking about conservation, thinking about the environment, thinking about all these basic things which underlie the conflicts that arise. It's a tall order. Do you think we can do it?
Well, but to have a framework in which they're interconnected, you can't do everything all the time. But if we were able to articulate a framework that places them together, that's what I was saying. It'd be great to bring a group together, an international group of scholars and activists, to try to formulate what we're doing in a way that empowers both that empowers both the life, how you live your personal life. You see, that's almost a third dimension. There's the social action, but then there's how the choices you make in your personal life. And Gandhi, of course, made that very, very clear. The trouble with Gandhi was he was terrible to his kids and his wife. He was great for society, but he was terrible to his family.
Could I just interrupt? Just be aware that when you do this, you put your hand on the microphone and we can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Now I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. Don't worry. I was going to ask a little bit about something you said a few minutes ago, and the whole question of integration and the way things are connected. We seem to have come back full circle, because that's very much a general systems idea, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes,
it goes back to the 1950s and to the Society for General Systems Research.
Yes, and I've been thinking about those days, and Kenneth was teaching at Michigan. He had a series, a general systems series, where people from every department at the university had a turn describing the systematics of their field and how they could see an interrelationship with other fields. And it was very exciting, and I learned so much from that. And it went on for a whole year, or maybe went on for 2 years. And then I think Kenneth had published books about general systems, so he's probably drawn on some of that material. But coming together in that way. It's something we don't do. We don't. There's no boundary crossing.
Yes, I mean one of the things that I'm disappointed in, and I'm going to ask you in a minute whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. So think about that. One of the things I'm disappointed in, not just in the field, but actually in my own institution, is that we are so busy that we never seem to have time to sit down and do exactly the kind of thing that Kenneth did back in the 1950s. That we've got lawyers, we've got historians, we've got political scientists, we've got anthropologists, we've got psychologists, and we really ought to sit down and try to build these
Right.
bridges across
Right.
the disciplines.
Right.
But we're so run off our feet now that we don't
Right.
have time
Yeah.
to talk to each other, and that
Yeah.
seems to be
Yeah.
symptomatic of the field
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And that worries me.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
are you? Let me go back. Are you optimistic about the field, or pessimistic, or how do you feel now? Which is what, 50 years later?
Yeah.
Almost 50 years, isn't it?
It's harder to be an optimist now, but I have to work at it. But the human possibility is still there. Yeah. And there is a precious spirit in every human being, no matter what awful things they've done, that have somehow failed to develop the way it could have. And so the cultivation of the human spirit is still going on. There's some, it's happening, not very much, and so somehow getting enough people away from TV and email.
All right, Elise, can we go back to Kenneth a bit? And
Yes,
the way he develops, because I mean, you've always been so close together that we regard you as a couple, you come as a set, as somebody once said. One of the things that has always interested me, anyway, is how did he get into peace and conflict studies from being an economist? I mean, I started out in economics and made the transition, but then I was not a very good economist. Was it his Quaker background? What motivated him, do you think?
Of course, when he was a student at Oxford, there were a group of young men who were all questioning what was going on in the world. And he discovered, I think he discovered Quakers when he was in college, yeah. And that group, several of them became very distinguished international figures, but I couldn't tell you now. But it was very clear that he had arrived. His father, his grandfather had been a Methodist preacher. His father was a plumber. But he went to Oxford on scholarship. They from a poor family from a poor section of Liverpool.
And much poorer died in those days.
Yeah. But here he discovered, a world out there, and so and then we came to this country as a Commonwealth Fellow after he graduated from college. You know that there are two ways they're called Rhodes Scholars from here. Yeah. And he had a great year traveling across the country and was exposed to, a lot of different. It was very, very stimulating for him. But he went back and taught at Edinburgh. He hadn't planned to emigrate. There was plenty to be done. He'd been done some work on the problems of agriculture in Europe in the war and so on. This is all very, very hazy for me. But when he came over, he emigrated by accident, so to speak. He came to a international Quaker gathering, which was in Philadelphia, and was offered a job at Colgate. And first he said, "No, I'm not looking for a move." Because he was, enjoying what he was doing at Edinburgh. And then they offered him a larger salary, and suddenly thought, hey, maybe I should consider this. So he emigrated.
Edinburgh to Colgate? quite a change. But he was emigrating as well from economics to
this,
studies? Or
no. He came as an economist, but he was already asking lots of questions about the state of the world, you see, from his college days. And then at Colgate, he taught economics, but he had done all this research on recovering from World War I, yes, in Europe. And so he was asked to go to the League of Nations in Geneva, in Princeton, to work on the problems of agricultural recovery in Europe when the war would be over. For the first year of our married life, we started out in Princeton. But he was so concerned about the effects of the war and that the U.S. shouldn't enter the war, and which I agreed with him. You know, and we were two active young Quakers at that point. So he wrote a letter. He drafted a letter which we both signed and published in the local newspapers and sent out various places, telling our fellow Americans that we should not enter this war, that there were better ways to deal with that conflict. He was immediately fired from the League of Nations because the head of the division pointed out to him that a person working at the League has no business making public pronouncements on public issues. So suddenly he was without a job. We spent the year, then they were just setting up camps for conscientious objectors in the U.S. at that time. And the draft had started, you know, and so on. So we were given, by the American Friends Service Committee, given the assignment to go around to all those camps and see how they were working and if they were doing okay, and make any suggestions about what was needed and so on. So it was a very interesting year, just going from one camp to another and across the country. Some of them were, you know, very rural, and others were smoke jumpers and firefighters, and you know, so anyway. And then he was asked by the Quaker president of Fisk University, which is a small black college in Nashville, to come there. They didn't have an economist, would he come and teach? And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I was exposed to the race relations issue. I'd never had any contact with it. Of course, we lived on the campus, and they wouldn't let me off the bus. I've always sat with my friends from Fisk at the back of the bus. The bus driver wouldn't let me off the bus. He'd slam the door in my face and swear at me when I tried to get off. Well, that's, sorry, I just, it happened that at Fisk that year, Robert Park of the University of Chicago and a group of very senior social scientists were at Fisk. He had retired there. Several people had retired. And then they were, and he was attracting very bright African social scientists, sociologists, and so on. And Kenneth was so stimulated by that group. You see, that opened up a whole new set of ways of thinking and issues and so on. And for me, it was great. I would sit in and listen. Whoa, what an education I got. And then he was, but that was just a one-year thing. And then he was offered a position at Iowa State College. And that was a very exciting place then, because this was the great oleo controversy. Do you color the oleo? Not if you're an Iowa farmer, you don't approve of that. Only butter can be yellow. And so he was many different controversies, different conflicts there. And he was brought in to bring his knowledge of how stuff had happened in Europe after the war and so on. So again, a very stimulating set of colleagues and so on. So what I'm saying is that he, in his first years in this country, he was exposed to a very interdisciplinary group. And so by the time we got to Michigan, and he had a more sort of conventional professorship in an economics department.
So he went to Michigan as an economics professor.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
Okay.
He was always a professor of economics. He died a professor of economics. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was at Michigan, and he was at Colorado. Yeah, so there was never any question about that. Okay. But of course he became known as the generals. The fact that the founding of the General Systems Society, and then the founding of the International Peace Research Association, and I'm sure there were a couple of other things he was involved in helping start, but I can't think what they are now. But Kenneth's mind, you see, worked in such extraordinary ways. And so he could never look at anything just the way other people did. He always saw something nobody else saw. And I read his sonnets all the time. He wrote sonnets. And these are the sonnets from the later life. And they're just the array is so of sonnets and numbers. Okay, I'm going to read you the sonnet sonnets on the numbers from 0 to 12. That's 27. Zero. This is the greatest number of them all, disguised as a mere point marking a graph, but underneath a diabolic laugh, an infinite abyss in which to fall of nothingness. No thing can more appall than nothing. No rope, no rod, no staff can save us from what can't be done by half. Where nothing is, there's no one we can call. But if there's anything, then there is hope. For take the smallest thing, divide by 0, and zoom, springs up infinity, the hero that even with blank nothingness can cope. For multiply infinity by naught, and the vast finite universe is wrought. Now, every one of his sonnets, grasps the nature of things in these ways that are the special way of thinking that he could do,
But it is interesting that, I always thought that reading Conflict and Defense, it couldn't have been written by anybody who wasn't an economist. The way he thinks about about conflicts and about the way in which you understand the dynamics of conflict is very, very much an economist's view of dynamism of systems. And it's an interesting. That was, I taught in the Department of Systems Analysis in London for a number of years.
Oh yes, yeah.
Right. That was the book that the systems analysts would really cotton on to from our field. A lot of the other stuff they would say, this is just wishy-washy idealism. But that one they loved. They could really actually empathize with conflict and defense, with the graph work, with the work on dynamics, and that was it.
And the last book he published, I remember helping get the papers ready to go up to the publisher. He was just a little while before he died. Was an analysis of all the census data on the U.S. from the beginning of when they started collecting census data to the present, just different aspects of the systems of the U.S. And he was doing that kind of thing right to the end, which was working with numbers.
Yeah. So there you are. You've arrived at Michigan. Kenneth is employed as an economist, and he's beginning to write these books, which are not economics at all. But he's there with a group of interesting people who get enthusiastic. But he's also there with some opposition. So can you tell us a little bit about who were the people around Kenneth at that time? You've mentioned Dave Singer. And then there's the sort of general question of the reception of peace and conflict studies in academia, because it's still not quite respectable. And in those days, I remember it was regarded as being idealistic, not academic. So what happened? There
was a young man. I don't think he ever took a PhD, but he was very bright. I can't think of his name. And he simply made making the center work his life activity, and he had a lot of organizing skills and hands-on, get it done kind of skills. And so I'm so sorry I can't remember his name. And then Bob Hefner, who was an instructor, I think, in the psychology department at that time, and was there, and somebody in the political science department, and I just can't quite think of his name. Then there was the Center for Social Science Research, the Institute for Social Science Research at Michigan, and I got. They employed me for a while as sort of a research assistant, and that was they just didn't interact with Ken. Was it just a whole other world? And they didn't interact with Kenneth. So I was very conscious that there were different worlds there. But so be it, and when the and when it came time for this is the Kennedy era, Kennedy was coming to speak. He was the time of his campaign. He was running for president, and so we stood up half the night outside the door to welcome him. We, meaning Kenneth and I and some faculty and a lot of students, and presented to him when he came. That was the students who presented to him the petition to establish the Peace Corps. And Kenneth was very strong supporter of this. The students who did that kind of thing, and then. They wanted to shut down the war university. And so they were going to go on strike and not go to classes, and ask the professors if they would participate in that. And Kenneth proposed the Board of Regents for the university would be very unhappy if the university shut down. Very unhappy. That would be not acceptable. So Kenneth suggested to the students that instead of shutting down in the day, that they stay open all night and open the Peace University at night. That's what they did. So that became the first all-night Peace University as a witness against the war.
What a nice idea. Because you're making the symbol.
Kenneth and one of the deans also approved it, so which was very important because Kenneth wasn't at a dean level. and the students loved it. So I remember I served coffee all night. Oh my! There just were different communities, you know, and I was very used to the fact that there were different communities, and I didn't expect. I just always, you know, careful to respect each group in their place, and I did go around to all our neighbors, I remember, and you know, to say, you know, we really respected the soldiers who served in the war, but we ourselves were pacifists, but we wanted them to know that we respected them. Yeah.
Yes, it's the same dilemma at the moment, isn't it? You know, how do you support our troops?
In Iraq, it's very much the same situation, very much the same. But in terms of academia, since you see I wasn't academically oriented in those days, it's hard for me to think of it in the ways that I know you would like to hear about it.
But since then, I mean, the whole, you know, I still get the slight sense that when I say to people, well, I'm in an Institute of Conflict Resolution, they sort of think, well, it's not quite like, is that an academic subject? Do you still get the same kind of reaction? You know,
well, I must say, at Dartmouth, which is in one sense, a more conventional school, very I was happy with the amount of support we got.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
As I say, I ran a faculty seminar, and not everybody liked it, you know, and so on. And they're much stronger on governance. And one thing, and I learned from that, because governance issues are not adequately treated in the peace research field. So, and who was the head of the, we became very good friends, and he was very supportive of the peace research field, but himself, you know, felt that governance was an important part of it. And so he was supportive, but from a distance. So it was very important that the political science department was supportive of what I did, and they would send their students to my classes, my peace studies class. Yeah. But that didn't mean that was their position, but that this was something that was worth paying attention to. And the dean, he then became president of the Quaker College in North Carolina. What's the Quaker College in North Carolina?
Oh, Swarthmore is in Pennsylvania. What's the one down in the south?
Well, anyway, there is a Quaker College in North Carolina. He just retired from the presidency. Don McNamara, and he was very strongly supportive of, and he was dean at Dartmouth when I was there, so he was very strongly supportive.
Well, it's a major advance, it seems to me, to get people to understand that at least there's something worth looking at.
Yes, that's it. That's it. It is a field. Yeah. It is a field. Yeah, and it may not be well enough developed, and I do think, you know, that the lack of attention to governance. You see, we get treaties signed, and then you get, right now we're simply stuck with the U.S. Dishonoring treaties and not being willing to sign the new ones and dishonoring the ones they have signed. Those are governance issues, and peace research doesn't have some good answers for that.
We have to stay away from the level of government, haven't we?
Yeah, and it's absolutely urgent that we get into that. So the one big thing that I would say we need to do is to really get governance more centrally located in the peace research field. That and the more attention to the education, you know, weaving something more about peace studies into the K through 12 system. Yeah.
Have I not asked a question to you which you think I should have asked?
You really cover the waterfront, my friend.
Well, we do our best. But if you were sitting here and I was sitting there, what would you want to ask? Can we go?
Well, let me just think. Well, if we haven't, you see, for me and for Kenneth, the spiritual grounding for our intellectual work was very, very important. And that's not something you can talk about in academic settings. But I want to say it because as you get towards the end of your life and you put it all together, that to what extent is there any kind of a growth in spiritual capacity? We have not paid attention to that. We can't do the intellectual capacity and the physical capacity if the spiritual capacity is undeveloped. It will not find its way into what it could be and needs to be.
Well, thank you. I've always, I have to say, envied people like you and Kenneth, that sort of spiritual basis that you have. It's something that is important for the work that gets done. So, anyway, Elise, thank you very much.